First time around was a sinner, and you let me know. Second time around was a winner. Now it's raining gold. Champagne showers.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spoiler Warning Podcast. This is review number 777 with a review of It's What's Inside. I'm Christopher Schnese.
And I'm Stephen Miller.
And if you're joining us for the first time, the Spoiler Warning Podcast is a weekly film review program. Each week on the show, we're going to dive in, debate, discuss, and argue over the latest films coming to a theater near you. This week, we're flipping that on its head. We're talking about a little film that is coming, or that came to a streaming platform near you in the last few weeks. But It's What's Inside is a film that I've heard some pretty good things about. This is going to be one of those weird episodes where we probably spend like a little bit of time talking about the film super ambiguously and then moving on into spoilers pretty quickly.
100%.
But yeah, this is one of those films that is best to go in not knowing anything. At least that's kind of the way everybody was talking about it back when I first started hearing about it. You know, I feel a little bit less so now that I know what's inside.
Yeah.
But I still like to preserve that experience for anybody who's about to go in and watch this film because, you know, learning in real time is definitely, you know, a big part of this film. So I don't know, anything before we get started that you kind of want to say about what we're getting into here, Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, just that I had heard buzz out of Sundance and immediately marked this as one of those movies that I was probably going to have to see and would not want to see because I assumed it was being compared to like Talk to Me, I think. And I just assumed this was going to be jump scare driven, terrifying thing. And because of that, I A, wasn't sure I was going to see it, but B, I had no interest in looking up anything about it. So I went in not knowing even like the basic premise of this movie. And I do think that is kind of the ideal way to view it if you're able, which means don't even read. There are a few synopses I've seen online after the fact that give away more than I would recommend you should when you watch it. So yeah, this is a movie best going in blind.
Yeah. And I think the you know, the official description for the film on IMDb does a pretty good job of you know, not giving away the total overall premise. So we'll see how this goes. Stephen, ready to do this?
Oh, I'm ready.
All right. We are going to take a listen to part of the trailer for It's What's Inside, and then we're going to come back and give everybody a review.
Well, you had mentioned that we might be playing some games tonight. Do you still want to play? Yeah, we'll play games tonight, man.
Hey, man!
Before I open this suitcase, this is just some needs to stay in this room type shit. So, no phones out or anything, okay?
Bro, that's like telling Nikki not to breathe and shit.
Wait, Forbes. What is that?
All right, so that was at least part of the trailer for It's What's Inside. Reading the description from IMDb, a group of friends gather for a pre-wedding party that descends into an existential nightmare when an estranged friend arrives with a mysterious game that awakens long-hidden secrets, desires, and grudges. Stephen Miller, what did you think of It's What's Inside?
Yeah, so I actually really liked this movie, and that mostly comes down to two things, the energy of the filmmaking and the premise itself. I can only talk about the first one in this non-spoiler section. But this movie, you know, there's been a trend in recent years of movies that try to capture the feeling of living in the, even social media generation probably doesn't do it justice, probably like the TikTok era, you know, the kind of zippy, quick cuts, people talking the way people actually talk in 2024. And I feel like this movie just nails it from the opening jump. This starts with an introduction to a character, Cyrus, who is just like a perfect example of a kind of gaslighting, timid, asshole type character. You know, Midsommar had this type of character. The Menu had something like this too. And I feel like the movie just like right away sets the tone of we are being cynical. We have these characters totally pegged. They are going to fit the archetypes that we've ascribed to them. And you're going to have a lot of fun just watching shit go down with these people. And I did. I had a lot of fun. The premise of this movie is really, really, really fucking clever. At least I would say. And what makes it clever is it is a cheat code that allows you to make a low budget film that has really wide-ranging implications, and you can communicate a lot with very, very, very little being actually done on the screen. It's the kind of movie that the moment you know what it is about, you fill in the blanks with all of the questions of what if this happened, what if that happened, oh my gosh, what if such and such goes down. And from then on, the movie is almost irrelevant. Like, the movie continues to be fun, but the joy of just like playing in that premise kind of carries it the rest of the way. So yeah, I don't know. We talked before recording about Bodies, Bodies, Bodies a little bit as a movie that one could compare this to. And that was like a very kind of hyper stylized movie about people at a party. I don't know why the hyper stylization here worked so much better on me. Like, I just felt like I was totally on this movie's wavelength from beginning to end. I was never not having fun. And even when I do believe it starts to get a bit convoluted, and we can get into that in the spoiler section, I kind of didn't care because I was just so enchanted with what this movie was doing. So yeah, I had a ton of fun with it. I don't think it's like the headiest movie of the year. I don't think it is perfect as a storytelling device, but the core idea and the energy that it communicates it with is so much fun that I just couldn't resist this movie. How about you?
Yeah, so I just finished watching this 2 hours ago or something like that, and I loved it. I think this is an incredibly clever film. As you said, like, it has this frenetic energy to it that from like the go, it's already firing like on all cylinders, and it's really it like keeps everything propelling forward in the story. And even if you're somebody who didn't care about the premise, like, there's enough there to just drive you and want to know what's happening next and kind of play along. I really enjoy the way it's like the fun nature of the way it's edited together and the way it plays with the things. They have a lot of that split screen stuff that you get in those couple of scenes in The Fall Guy, where it's just kind of playing with the fact that it's messing with stuff. Like, it knows that it is a highly stylized film, and it's not that anybody is performing in a stylized way. It's just trying to mess with like the different filmmaking choices. And you talked about this film not being super heady, and I think that this film specifically didn't want to be heady, right? It's not trying to get one past you. It wants you to know what's happening at all times. And it's not that it's like holding your hand. It's just not trying to hide any of its cards. It wants all the cards to be on screen. And it uses some of that style in the filmmaking to throw those cards on screen so that you can see them happening, right? And I really like what it does. And especially there's a moment in the film, which we aren't talking about here, which is when everybody is about to learn what's inside. And it's doing this multi-screen thing in the moment, but it's not just them playing with filmmaking style again. Like, what is shown on the screen when in that moment is all very, very specific and is tied to the game that is being played. And it's like those kind of flourishes just feel so cool and so inviting and so clever that it's like this film is pretty good at so many different things that, to me, the overall balance of what it's doing is so elevated just by being, we talk a lot about films where we come out of a film, we're like, that was a fucking competent as shit movie right there. Like, that movie just knows what it's doing, knows what it's playing with, and goes for it. And I love that about this film. This film telegraphs everything it's going to do. And as you were saying, Stephen, like, there are things where you're like, yeah, but what if something like this happened? And the film is going to deal with that. And it doesn't, it's not trying to be more clever than you, but it also knows that your questions aren't outside of the reach of what it's already thought of.
Yep.
So I just, like, the whole time I was watching this film, I was vibing with it. And I was like, you know what? This is fucking great. I love what this thing is doing. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about a few different things in spoilers. But overall, love the film.
Yeah, and I think one thing I can highlight before spoilers that really got me hooked from the beginning is how well it communicates a lot of stuff non-verbally. Like, there are a lot of characters that we need to be introduced to very quickly in order to understand this premise. And I feel like within the first maybe 10 minutes of the movie, we have totally understood the relationship dynamic between Cyrus and Shelby. We have totally understood Shelby and her feelings towards the other women that she sees. We've gotten some Instagram scrolling and, like, again, hyper stylized kind of flash cuts. We understand how one character secretly is pining for another character just by a kind of a vignette, bouquet kind of effect that happens on the camera. When Forbes shows up, we immediately get the sense of the awkward tech guy and the wild card unpredictability. There's so much that is done just from like the look and feel of characters and the way the camera follows them. It just, again, it isn't that it is doing anything shocking or over the top or unpredictable, but it nails it so well. You just kind of know you're in the hands of a competent filmmaker who, like, they know that you know that they know that you know everything, and they're just having so much fun with it. That is just it makes it, this is billed as a horror movie. I am willing to say that billing, if not incorrect, at least makes me question what horror means, because it certainly is not the kind of movie that would scare me in any way as the canonical scared at everything guy. I went into this believing it to be a horror movie, meaning believing it would be the kind of thing that I would potentially hate. And I so could not resist it after 10 minutes. I was like, even if you ruin my night, I'm going to be glad that I went along for this. And that's just like the good-natured vibe of this movie. So I really cannot express enough how well the filmmaking style kind of invites you into the game that is being played.
Yeah, there is, again, we'll talk about it in spoilers, but there is a nature to what's going on, which is, it's one of those things that I've talked about in the past where it's like, it itself is not scary. Mm-hmm. My brain going places, just logically extending certain things, is terrifying to me.
Right.
Before spoilers, there is one more thing that I do kind of want to say is I feel like this film could have maybe, again, no actual complaints about this film, but I think setting it back in time a little bit, like not today, might help part of my brain from thinking about logical ramifications for things.
Right.
And we'll talk about it in spoilers, but there is a level of, requiring to memorize certain bits of information that this film doesn't actually consider. So I just, not everything is just Face ID.
Right. Yeah. I agree with you. I have nitpicks for sure. And I also think, like, by the last maybe 30 minutes of the movie, I was still vibing, but I didn't really care what the plot was doing anymore at that point. Like, because I do think there are, if not total plot holes, at least gaps in the logic where I feel like I can see a million ways that this might not make any sense, and I'm fine to just shrug those aside and enjoy it. But like, I do think there's going to be stuff to nitpick if we want to.
Yeah. Cool. Any non-spoilery stuff you want to say before we get into this?
Hopefully this won't be considered spoilery, because I think a person would have to do a lot of the heavy lifting to get there. But what I really think is clever about this movie, like a lot of the kind of breakout, quote, horror movies of the last few years, like, again, Midsommar or even Get Out, is that this is, despite it being about a thing, it is also about a particular, like, interaction or relationship dynamic. And I think this carries that very well. Like, that arc I found completely satisfying. And I think the premise is a really brilliant way of showcasing that. And the thing I was going to say that might seem spoilery is I think this is a great companion to The One I Love. And it brought up a lot of similar thoughts in my head. It is almost like a turning that premise on its head, but it has similar kinds of questions about what does it mean to be satisfied in a relationship? What does it mean to want more? What is the other person actually thinking inside about who you are? Yeah, I don't know. Just a really, really, really clever way to blow up a relationship and turn it into a kind of horror, thriller, comedy, whatever the hell this was.
Yeah, and another thing too, when you watch films like this, or like, say, Bodies, which we've already talked about, characters might take actions, and it's like a stretch that they went from being like totally normal to suddenly acting in a certain way.
Right.
Given the nature of this film, I buy every single person's action and motivation, and like it doesn't feel like, nothing in this film feels like a stretch to me. Like every single thing anybody does, I'm like, yeah, given where the film goes to, I this is a logical behavior. It doesn't feel like people are suddenly just, like murdering people left and right. You know what I mean? So that is another huge plus for this film.
Yeah, this makes me want to get into spoilers because we can definitely talk to how well it handles those stretches, and specifically the one event that I'm actually too dumb, so I did not see it coming, and it is the giant glaring question that when the movie threw it at me, I was like, oh, okay, now there are no rules. Now I completely understand what is going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we will do that. I definitely did this in real time and am not editing this back in later. But before we get to our goodbye times, we have to give this film a verdict. So, Stephen Miller, if you're going to give this a must-see, recommend with the caveat, wait for rental, pass with the caveat, or a must-avoid, what would you give it?
I'm rounding this up to a must-see. Like, I don't think this is a perfect film. I think it's a little scrappy. And again, I think it gets a little bit overly messy at the end. But for the joy of watching it and just the kind of elegance of the premise and how much it makes do with so little, I just found this a total delight. And I think you should definitely go seek it out on Netflix.
Yeah, this is a must-see for me. I think this is a thing that is probably going to have pretty good word of mouth. I think a lot of people are going to watch it and then ask other people if they watched it. And I think everybody should watch it. So, yeah. And with that, I'm going to return to what I said right before I didn't bring up verdicts at the end of this before we went into spoilers. Later. But before we get into spoilers, there are some people who are listening to this right now who haven't seen the film yet. Y'all should hit pause and go off and do that, and then come back and listen to the spoilers. So we're going to say goodbye to you now. Stephen Miller, if people want to find you throughout the week, where can they do that?
People can find me at Threads or Blue Sky at sdavidmiller or sdavidmiller.com.
People can find me at ChristopherInRealLife.com or ChristopherIRL on a number of social platforms. You can find the podcast over at thespoilerwarning.com where you can get a bunch of the back episodes of the show. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can do so on Overcast, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts are found. If you want to know when the episodes go live, you can follow us at twitter.com/spoilerwarning, facebook.com/thespoilerwarning, or instagram.com/thespoilerwarning. If you want to get a hold of us directly, you can send an email to fans@thespoilerwarning.com, or you can use the contact form on our site. Music for this episode will come from a track selected from artlist.io. That music is playing right now. That music is going to fade up. And when that music fades out, we are going to be going into full-blown spoilers for this film. I can't even make a pun or anything because it might be a spoiler itself. So we're going to take a break with that music, and then we're going to come back and throw some spoilers at you.
This is what you get. Devil's on your brain. When the devil's on your brain.
All right, we are back. This is spoiler territory. It's the after part of our review of It's What's Inside. We are here to tell you what's inside. Stephen, where do you want to get started?
Wait a minute. Why are you... You're Stephen. Why are you pretending?
What the
fuck, dude?
What the fuck?
So yeah, that was a very subtle nod to the fact that the premise of this movie that I managed to avoid knowing is that this is a body swap film. Particularly, they are playing a mafia or werewolf style game where they randomly enter each other's bodies, the permutation of which only Forbes, the game master, knows, and they have to try to pretend to be them, though let's be real, that premise kind of goes away immediately. They're much more interested in having fun being each other than they are in playing a game of who is going to out who at the same time. Yeah. Did you know this premise going in?
No, because I had heard this movie is really fun. Also, you should know nothing. So every time somebody has been like, hey, have you watched It's What's Inside? And I said, no, I haven't. I didn't know it was out yet. Don't tell me anything. So I'm not very spoiler averse, but for this film specifically, I have been doing my best to not hear anything. Even when I was talking to Jamie about like trying to get her to watch it, I was like, we're going to watch a movie. I can't tell you what it's called because I don't want you to Google it. So
I don't trust you.
Yeah, but we ended up not watching it together. She's watching it right now while we're recording this. So.
Nice.
But yeah,
that is funny.
We both avoided it, which is great. And I hope anybody who's listening right now also avoided knowing what's going on.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's just so right off the jump, I said that I think the premise is very clever here. Not that no one has done a body swap movie before, but the way this does a multiple kind of round robin body swap and turns that into a game. It is not only very fun, it is so like easy to film, right? Because you don't have to have a special effect. You know, like they have a kind of cool effect occasionally where they fade back to this kind of red, like Frodo in the Darklands or whatever.
Yeah, you're like literally seeing what's inside. Yeah,
where you're seeing what's actually inside. But for the most part, this just is such an elegant, simple idea that is immediately extremely fun, right? Just to watch people pretend to be each other and be like, all of the first questions you would ask of what if you could inhabit the body of someone else basically get answered in this movie. So yeah, I just thought it was such a fucking cool premise. Even though, again, like, do you feel like they kind of threw away the mafia idea right away? I don't remember anyone really trying to figure out who anyone else is.
So the first round, they keep it. Upon second round, everybody's like, nah, I want to use this for other purposes. And like the characters throw it out. It's not like the film throws it out, right? Those characters are like, no, we want to do this again. But like they're no longer interested in the game itself, which may or may not be exactly what Forbes wants.
Yeah.
And we'll get into the motivations of quote unquote Forbes later.
Well, exactly. And also the awkwardness as a tech bro of Forbes that I thought was so funny the first time it was introduced gets, you know, basically another layer added to it by the end when you realize what the movie was actually doing. So I just love the idea of a guy who is not comfortable in his own skin working on its own terms and then also working as a twist later in the movie. That's just a fun combination.
Yeah. So let's talk about the big reveal, right? So during the big reveal, everybody is sitting down to start playing the game. The machine has been brought out. It's being booted up or turned on, charged up, and everybody starts having electrodes handed out. We still don't know exactly what's going to happen. It starts to turn into a Brady Bunch style grid, but like as Forbes is plugging in the electrodes, the people start popping up on screen. And it's like showing it's basically like an old school telephone switchboard where you're literally plugging one person's brain into another person's brain and then setting all the swaps up, and it puts everything on the screen. Everybody's like, what's going to happen? We don't know. Forbes is like, it's just going to be a 20-second experience, hits the button, and everybody freaks out. And immediately Cyrus is talking calm because Cyrus is Forbes. And like, that's the moment where it's like, you don't know, people could be feeling euphoria, an out-of-body, I guess they literally are having an out-of-body experience, but like they could be experiencing anything, but like you just watch everybody freak out and you can see the clue in to understand what's happening even before the characters are like, that was weird, I was in somebody else's body. And I just love the setup for that and just feeling that about to take place and like knowing that we could be going anywhere right now. And even though it's a simple place that we went, it's still awesome to see everybody's reactions simultaneously and kind of experience it that way. And that lets you into like what's going on. And then your brain starts extrapolating, okay, the rest of this film, what are we doing here?
Exactly. And at least for me, first of all, I think that is such like, it is a great example of the nonverbal ways the movie basically communicates what it wants very quickly, because that is such a fast kind of succinct way to tell us exactly how this game is played and what it means to all characters involved. Yeah, I had a ton of fun with that. And it's interesting because this movie, I kind of like that this is being billed as a horror movie because it kept my anticipation up the whole time. Like, namely, the moment I figured out what the plot was, I was thinking, oh no, what terrible thing is Forbes trying to do with this technology? Like, what is the horrific way this game night is going to devolve into people murdering each other? And it doesn't devolve into people murdering each other, right? Like, they do backstab each other in one way or another and people die. But this, like bodies, oh, I guess maybe I shouldn't spoil. Spoilers for bodies as well. Like bodies, this is not actually about a murderer. This is about like a death happens, and then how does everyone else respond in the wake of that death? But because I had the kind of the built-in dread or anticipation that came from knowing this was a horror movie, it raised the stakes from the jump, where I didn't think this was just going to be like a fun semi-sci-fi comedy or whatever. And I liked that energy, even though it felt a little bit like a bait and switch because the horror never came.
Yeah. But yeah, like, you know, like I was kind of teasing in the first half of this episode, is once there are deaths, there is existential horror,
Yes.
right? Like there is like we can't go back from this, but some people can.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a terrifying, like, thought, is the idea that, like, now we're in a situation where half the group has their own body to return to, but some people don't, and everybody now has an opinion on what the next course of action is. So that did, like, for me, like, suddenly, like, I was already super stoked, and it was like, as they were going up to the roof, and I was like, all right, these two are going to hook up on the roof. At least one of them is going to fall and die, and that's going to cause problems. Up until that moment, we are in a thing where all the stakes are emotional, right? You have a bunch of people with interconnected romantic entanglement, and all of their own experiences are going to be in jeopardy by what the situation is allowing for. But then once people die, it just ups it to another level where it's like all that emotional stakes are still there. But now that you have like real world stakes where people now have to figure out what they're going to do next, that's when I was like, holy shit, this is freaking amazing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was so there were two moments where this film did things with the premise that escalated it for me. The first happens almost right away, which is that Forbes pretends to be Cyrus, right? He basically, in the first round of the game, pretends that he is inhabiting the body that Cyrus is actually in, and vice versa. And immediately that becomes a little creepy, because it's like, what is Forbes trying to do with this? But then also your mind kind of races of, what does this mean for the character? Like, perfect anonymity, you know, like totally no one knows who I am, so I can do whatever I want. Yeah. And I think, again, in a world where I thought this was going to be a violent horror movie, that would have been the start of unleashing this terrifying thing of like, what are people willing to do when they are truly unaccountable? But then it also, I just thought it was just really well done in painting Cyrus as this creep, you know, and showcasing this kind of, not even blurry consent, like clear consent violation, and how much like the moment no one has to know who he is, he becomes this kind of porny creep, basically, who just wants to use other people. And like, that is why you mentioned that this movie doesn't take any leaps, in the sense that you always know why people do what they do in the movie. This movie does a really good job of painting Cyrus as like a sniveling creep in a way that makes me understand why Shelby at the end is allowing him to rot in prison. Because it just does so succinctly. It just shows like, man, this guy fucking sucks. Now, maybe the penalty for sucking shouldn't be, you know, being blamed for a murder and spending life in prison, but hey, I'm fine with it. And then the second escalation, you know, which you already talked about, is when Brooke and Ruben die. That I felt dumb, but it had not occurred to me what would happen if someone died in the game. You know, the idea of that body is gone forever. So now you are stuck being someone else. Yeah. And the escalating horror, and how all of a sudden the chess pieces just get like thrown, you know, basically anyone can do anything. I really like that manic escalation. And I think it happens like right around the time I needed the movie to raise the stakes. So yeah, I was really into it.
Yeah, so there is one tiny minor complaint about what this film does, which directly ties back into that scene, because I expected, you know, they're hooking up on the roof, she is on the ledge, and the ledge breaks. I was expecting her only to fall, and him to still be up on the roof and be like, oh shit. But then now, like, I figured that was going to be complicated, how that would complicate things. But the one thing this film was not willing to do ever, other than the reveal at the end that Forbes is actually Forbes' sister, is it didn't want to break the gender barrier. There always had to be the same number of men and women in that group because they were always pairing off in different ways. And the roof couldn't have happened where just the one person died, because then you'd have an uneven number of people left, and the body swapping wouldn't fit perfectly anymore, right? There's always a thing of, we can always put two people in two people, and if everything is odd, then it basically turns into like that episode of Futurama where they started doing the brain swapping things, and they had to figure out how many swaps they could do to get everybody back into themselves. This always is a one-to-one the entire time, and like I think this film is near perfect as it is, but that's just one thing that I couldn't not think about the entire time, is they were never doing that level of confusion. It was always...
Yeah, I was wondering, too, why they didn't do a gender swap. Because, I mean, this movie anticipates pretty much every immediate question you would have.
Yeah.
And one of the kind of immature questions you would have that they do, even in the non-gender swap version, is the moment someone is inside someone else, like, what's keeping them from looking at themselves naked, right? Or doing things like that. Like, that's the kind of thing that you could imagine the high school version of this movie doing right away. And, like... It makes sense because Forbes is calling the shots, and Forbes has decided to do it this way, partly because of, we think, his own kind of creepy desire to hook up at this party, you know, and so he, assuming all the characters are straight, he is keeping it so, like, you know, everyone has a chance to hook up with someone new. Of course, I'm saying he, but that's actually Beatrice the whole time. So, yeah, I don't know why the movie... It seems like it could have been fertile ground to play with, of like the throwing gender dysphoria into the mix and seeing what happens there. I don't really know why the movie didn't touch that, except for it wants to be like a zippy 100 minutes in and out, and that was just like too many things to approach at the same time.
Yeah, and I think it's purely that they always needed the math to work out, because they were more in... I'm not saying more interested in a negative way. Like, the thing they wanted to do is fuck with the relationship dynamics. And if it loops around too many times, then there's going to be other problems, right? Where like Cyrus might not be trying to hook up with so-and-so if, you know, if he doesn't know if it's actually the other dude, right? So it's like, it's not interested. It wanted specific connections between people to always be able to be maintained regardless of who was in the scene. And it was like, no, it gets too hard for us to manage that if we're flopping around all the time. So
yeah. Okay, can I ask a nitpicky question? If you were playing this game, would you keep your phone in your pocket? I think the first thing I would do is have some kind of put our phones in those bags that comedians, you know, make you use before you enter the showing. Because it is so clear that people can fuck with you right away. And that was the one thing that these like social media, extremely online people wouldn't find some way of protecting their most personal info. Just really, really, really surprised me.
So it doesn't surprise me that a majority of the people playing the game wouldn't even have thought of that. But yeah, basically what you have to do if you're playing this game is type your password wrong like 4 times in a row, and then it'll disable the face unlock. But that gets to the thing that I was teasing earlier again, is I feel like if this was set in the 90s, it would solve a bunch of those problems. Because like today, like there is a scene where somebody transfers money from the account of the body they are currently possessing. But there's more involved than just unlocking your phone with your face, right? Like you can't just go do that. Like I'm on a phone that I wasn't on a month ago. All my investment apps like forced me to like rescan my ID and send it to them and like do a bunch of things to prove that I am whom I am. And I was still unlocking it with the same face, right? Like, so I think that, you know, it just, part of me was thinking like, it totally makes sense that like you could impersonate a person and do anything you need to. Like somebody could go back, if they were stuck in Forbes' body, they could figure out where he works, go back there and just try to play it off like they're Forbes. I'm sure people would figure it out because he wouldn't be able to do any of the stuff he does at that job. But it's not like if you could unlock my phone and it got you into 1Password that like you'd be able to do everything, because you wouldn't have my password for those things, right? Like it just, I feel like there is something that didn't work for me 100% about like the ramifications of like you have to have a lot of things memorized just to be able to use your face to unlock and get into something. So, you know,
right.
you could tweet,
no, I guess like
you could do all those
other
things.
Yeah, exactly. Because other than transferring money, like Instagram or whatever, it would still be logged in, right? All you need to do is unlock the phone, and then you're fine. And then even they didn't show it in this movie. It would have been riveting, I'm sure. But whenever I've had to wire any like serious amount of money, my bank calls me to confirm that I initiated the wire. And that you could also do if you body swapped, right? Because you can answer that phone and talk and be their voice. So I can see it, but I can also see why in the 90s this would be a solved problem already for basically the reasons you're hinting at. It's not a big deal, you know. I just the trust that these people immediately have in their friends seemed wild to me. Okay, now I have a question for you, because I say that I think this movie gets a little convoluted. I mean primarily with the Beatrice stuff. This introduces the concept of Forbes having a sister, Beatrice, and they very quickly, in a way where, again, the filmmaking style, I love it. They're like revising the party while they're remembering details and telling it. You know, like I like the look and feel a lot.
Yeah, the flashback photography stuff was so fucking cool. I want awesome. Every flashback in every movie to be like that.
Right, and it's recounting this night that goes by so fast. I caught it, but it isn't like it left a big impression on me, which was a crazy night. Forbes and his sister were there. His sister was drinking underage. Someone told on Forbes. Forbes got kicked out. Sister had a spiral and eventually went to a mental institution. The twist at the end that we've already, referenced is that who we think of as Forbes is actually Beatrice. Like, his sister has taken his body and is now on a rampage.
Yeah.
She came here to screw over Ruben and then eventually Dennis when she learns who Dennis is. What was her plan? Because the only reason anyone has been screwed over is that Ruben, of his own volition, hooks up with Brooke and they both accidentally fall and die. So I feel like, did you need the conniving second person that was causing all of this? And what did she actually do that was any different from if Forbes had just wanted to play this as a game?
So there's one line where I think it's whoever Forbes is in, who is actually Beatrice, says it. But basically, it's a combination of trying to get as far away from who she is as possible, but also she is just trying to create situations in which she can escape with no trace, right? Mm-hmm. Like, she can basically just move to another body so that the real Forbes can never find her. And she's just like body jumping as often as she can. And she knows, obviously, that group had that party back then, and she probably either found that invite or whatever and was like, holy shit, this is my chance to leave. I'll go there. I'll get them to play. I can fuck with them. And at the end, I can just pick one of them that's the easiest and leave as them, and have that group be so broken and disjointed that, like, it's not like she also booby-trapped the ledge upstairs, but like she wanted people to go break up that friend group so that when she picked one of them to hop into, that she could get away scot-free. And like it would be reasonable that like nobody would suspect that was Beatrice inside of Forbes, inside of whoever she jumped to, right? So obviously, I think when people died, that was like the hell, I did it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know that Beatrice knew it was going to work until people accidentally died, and then it became like just like pure happenstance that allowed her to get what she needed.
Yeah, because I just feel like the movie, I understand where she winds up in the end of total freedom. She's got the money, she has a new body, and she can jump as much as she wants. I feel like the movie framed it as Beatrice specifically went here as revenge on Ruben for or on Dennis. I forget who it was that she was most mad at originally, for what happened at the party and how it ruined her life. And that revenge is what I don't really understand. Like, if no one had fallen off a ledge, I don't know what her move was going to be to make it so this would occur. Or maybe, maybe round one can be understood that way, where she's testing the waters by lying about who she is after switching, right? She's pretending to be who Cyrus actually switched with. And maybe that is her, like, trying out how easily could she escape and then never be caught. So maybe I can see her testing the waters. I just don't know what her game plan was.
I think the revenge was secondary, right? I think she was planning to go there and just leave as somebody else one way or another. And that testing the waters was like, how can I get some of these people to never talk to each other again?
Yep.
So that if I'm one of those people, it makes sense why I'm not answering my phone or not responding to texts.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, so the one thing that this film doesn't do is another thing that I was thinking of. Obviously, the cops arrive at the end. There is no reality in which the cops will believe anything that you say about what happened that night. Like, even if nobody had died, but like something happened and somebody showed up and they were arresting the wrong person, nobody's going to believe. And that was the last time they could do the switcheroo. So it would have taken 24 hours to recharge the suitcase. The cops aren't going to just like hold you in jail and give you your suitcase and let you play the game to prove that it's real. You know what I mean? Like, it's a simple test that like anybody who was willing to be shown could immediately see the reality of what it does, but nobody would be willing to let you show them that. Like, nobody's going to trust you and go like, no, I'm not letting you fucking connect electrodes to your head, like, so you can get out of jail somehow, right? Like,
right.
So
and I will say, in the vein of the police showing up, there is one leap that I have trouble imagining someone would do, just because I can't believe he would be so dumb. And that is Dennis as Cyrus calling the cops and confessing that he did it before he has secured any guarantee that he will in fact switch back out of Cyrus's body. What a dumb move.
It was a dumb move. I believed it because he wasn't thinking rationally. He just he watched himself die. Which I'm pretty sure fucks you up. I don't you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I don't think you watch yourself die and then you're just normal after that, especially while you're in somebody else's body. So yeah.
Yeah, I've never done LSD, so I've never experienced ego death. I have no idea what it means to watch yourself die.
Yeah. Let's see. Anything else, Stephen?
Not really. Just, I guess, to underline when I said before that I like how this uses the premise to explore a relationship. I really like what it does with Shelby and her understanding of how Cyrus sees her, and like all the different moments where she's trying to connect to him, and the only way he can be into her is by not recognizing that she is actually Shelby, and then eventually the games that are being played of what would make him finally want her in the end. I just thought that was really, really, really clever and super well done.
Yeah. Cool. All right.
That's it.
We done, Stephen?
Oh, we're done.
All right, let's go boot that suitcase up one more time so we can get back. It would have been funny if you just did the entire intro and goodbye and all those things, and we just didn't mention it at all. And then I
thought about hijacking it and doing that, but I didn't know if I could remember all the lines.
See, if we had more time, it would have been perfect. I wonder if anybody would have actually noticed it or just been like, oh, it was weird Steven did it this time.
Why do I like the host slightly less all of a sudden?
Oh, all right. Yeah, you have to giggle more, Steven. That would be the giveaway.
I know.
All right, next body swap movie.
We'll do it.
Later.
Bye.